The cry in the ashes. The sky was gray and the ground was full of broken metal, dust, and silence. Nothing moved. No birds, no wind, no life. The war had ended months ago, but the planet still looked dead. Jalen, a human scavenger, walked slowly through the ruins. He wore a dusty jacket and carried a scanner. He had no reason to be here, except that something had pulled him back. Maybe it was the dreams, or maybe it was guilt. He stepped over a burned wall and paused. The smell of ash and metal filled the air. His scanner showed no life nearby, nothing valuable either, just ruins. He turned to leave. Then he heard it, a soft voice. It was almost a whisper, so small he wasn't sure it was real. But it came again, a shaky, broken voice. "Please, don't leave us, human." Jalen froze. He looked around but saw nothing, just rubble and smoke. Then he followed the sound. His boots crunched on broken glass as he moved closer to a large piece of metal, half buried in the ground. Under it, he saw something move, a small hand. He knelt down and pulled back the metal carefully. Dust flew out and he coughed. When the air cleared, he saw her, a little alien girl no older than 6. Her skin was a soft purple, her eyes large and glowing faintly. She was covered in dirt, and her clothes were torn. She held a tiny doll, made of old wires and cloth. She looked up at him, her lips trembling. "Please don't go," she said again. "Please help Mama." Jalen blinked. He hadn't heard anyone speak to him like that in a long time. Slowly, he reached out his hand. She flinched but didn't run. She was too weak. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." She crawled forward. As she did, something behind her shifted. A low groan came from deeper in the hole. Jalen leaned over and saw a second figure, an adult, female alien. She was badly hurt. Her arm was twisted, her side bleeding. Her eyes barely opened, but when they did, she looked straight at Jalen. "Take her," the woman whispered. "Take my child and run." The girl grabbed her mother tightly. "No, I stay with Mama." Jalen looked around. He knew this place. The fighting here had been brutal. No one came back. The planet was marked as lost. So why were they still here? He checked his scanner again. Still no signals. But then something blinked red. Movement. In the sky. His heart sank. Drones. Old war drones sometimes returned to clean up survivors. To finish the job. He looked back at the girl. She stared at him with wide, pleading eyes. Her mother coughed, blood staining her lips. "You're human," she said slowly. "They won't kill you, but her, they will." Jalen swallowed hard. He hadn't come here to play hero. He just wanted to find scrap, maybe trade it for food. He didn't sign up for this. But then the child grabbed his sleeve and whispered again, "Please, don't leave us." His hands tightened into fists. He stood up and pulled out a small signal blocker from his pack. He placed it on the ground near them, masking their heat and movement. "We can't stay here," he said. "Do you have a place to hide?" The woman pointed weakly toward a cracked stone wall nearby. "Old bunker. Behind it." Jalen nodded. He lifted the girl first. She was light and didn't struggle. Then he bent down and picked up the mother, groaning as he carried her. The drones were coming closer. He could hear the low hum in the sky. Behind the wall he found the bunker, partly buried but still solid. The door was old, but Jalen forced it open. Inside was dark, cold, and full of dust, but it was better than outside. He set them down gently. The girl held her mother's hand and looked at Jalen with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Jalen said nothing. He sat near the door, listening. The drones passed overhead. For now, they were safe. But something didn't feel right. The child. Her eyes. Her voice. She wasn't just any survivor. And the mother's words, "They'll kill her," kept echoing in his mind. Why? Why would they come back just for one little girl? He didn't know the answer yet. But deep down he knew this was just the beginning, and he couldn't walk away. Not this time. Hidden in the rubble. The bunker was cold and dark, but it was quiet. Jalen sat near the door, watching the small alien girl hold her mother's hand. The child had fallen asleep at last, but her grip on her mother had not loosened. Her tiny face looked tired but peaceful. Her doll rested beside her, torn and dirty but clearly loved. The mother, however, was fading. Her skin had lost color and her eyes were barely open. She was breathing, but weakly. Jalen had done what he could. He wrapped her wounds and gave her water, but he was no doctor and supplies were low. He knew time was running out. "You should have left," the mother whispered. Jalen looked at her. "And let the girl die out there?" "I'm not that kind of man." She tried to smile, but it came out as pain. "You don't know who she is." "I don't need to." She turned her head slightly toward her daughter. "They're still hunting us. For her. She's the last of something they fear." Jalen frowned. "She's just a child." "No," the mother said softly. "She's hope." Before he could ask what she meant, a deep sound echoed above them. The drone engines were returning. Jalen quickly pressed a button on his signal blocker. The hum grew louder, then faded again. The drones had passed, but not for long. Jalen knew the signal blocker wouldn't hide them forever. The bunker was only a temporary shelter. He needed a plan. He needed a way out. He turned his attention to an old control panel on the wall. Dusty wires stuck out, and parts were missing, but maybe, just maybe, he could get something working. As he worked, his eyes kept glancing at the little girl. Even in her sleep, she looked afraid. Her name, he'd learned, was Kaylee. She had only spoken a few words since they entered the bunker. Most of them were for her mother. But once, when Jalen gave her a small piece of chocolate from his pocket, she had whispered, "Thank you, human." It was the first time someone had thanked him in years. The old control panel sparked and he jumped back. A small screen lit up. He quickly shut it down. Too risky to send out a signal. But now he knew the bunker still had power. That gave him an idea. There was a broken hover vehicle buried near the entrance. He had seen it when they came in. If he could dig it out and fix it, they might have a chance to escape. It wouldn't be easy, but it was better than waiting to die. He grabbed a small light and made his way outside. Carefully, he moved the stones and metal covering the vehicle. The sound was loud, and he stopped every few seconds to check the sky. No drones yet. Not this time. After nearly an hour, the front of the hovercraft appeared. It was dented and dirty, but the core engine looked untouched. Jalen smiled. Maybe luck hadn't fully abandoned him. He returned to the bunker, dirt on his hands, hope in his chest. Kaylee was awake now, sitting beside her mother. She looked up as he entered. "You're leaving?" she asked in a quiet voice. "No," he said quickly. "I'm going to fix the old flyer outside, then we're getting out of here." Kaylee looked down. "Mama can't fly." Jalen sat beside her. "Then I'll fly for her." The mother opened her eyes again. Her voice was faint. "If you save her, you do more than save a life. You save a world." Jalen shook his head. "I'm no hero." She looked at him, her eyes clear for a moment. "Maybe not. But you're human. And you listened." As the bunker grew quiet again, Kaylee pulled out her doll and held it up. "She has no name," she said. "Can I name her after you?" Jalen laughed softly. "I'm not that special." But Kaylee only smiled and whispered to the doll, "His name is Jalen. He helps people." He looked away, unsure how to feel. The war had made him cold, alone. But now, in this dark, broken place, a little alien girl had called him something more. A helper. A protector. He stood and looked at the door. He would fix the hovercraft. He would get them out. Because this time, he wouldn't run from someone who needed him. This time, he would stay, and fight if he had to. Even if the whole galaxy wanted her gone, he would protect her, because someone had to. because no one else did, and because of her small voice in the ash. Please don't leave us, human. He hadn't, and he wouldn't. Drones in the sky. Jalen worked through the night. His fingers were numb, his back ached, but he didn't stop. Each sound outside made him pause and listen, his hand on his weapon, heart tight in his chest. The hovercraft was old and beaten, half buried in dust and twisted metal. Still, he believed he could fix it. He had to. The girl was depending on him now. Her eyes followed him wherever he went, filled with quiet trust. And that trust terrified him. Kaylee sat cross-legged on the cold floor of the bunker. She had taken a piece of metal and started drawing in the dust. At first, Jalen thought she was just passing time. But when he finally looked at her drawings, his breath caught. Symbols. Strange ones. Curved shapes, stars, eyes, lines that bent in patterns he almost recognized. One of them matched the mark on the back of his dog tag. He had never known what it meant, just a symbol given during training, part of a forgotten project. But here it was, drawn by a child who had never seen Earth. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. Kaylee looked up. "Mama says I dream them." Jalen didn't answer. He stared at the tag again. His fingers trembled. Before he could ask more, a sharp sound cut through the air, mechanical and cold. A drone, then another. He ran to the entrance and looked up. 2 war drones circled in the sky, scanning the area. Their red lights blinked slowly as they moved lower. Jalen grabbed the signal blocker and adjusted it, hoping it still had enough power to hide them. But the drones were more advanced. Then he remembered. Their sensors swept wide and their motion was faster. He cursed under his breath. Inside the bunker, Kaylee's mother opened her eyes weakly. "They're here," she said. "Yes," Jalen replied, watching the sky. "But they're not getting you." He rushed outside and crouched beside the hovercraft. He had to finish. The engine. The last connection was loose. He twisted the wires together, sparks flying into his face. The engine hummed. Not strong, but alive. One of the drones stopped moving. It turned its lens directly toward the ruins. Then it dropped lower. Jalen ran inside. "We're leaving. Now!" Kaylee clutched her mother. "She can't move." Jalen's voice cracked. "We don't have a choice." He grabbed the hoverboard from the bunker corner, small, just enough to carry 2. He lifted the mother onto it and secured her as best as he could. Kaylee climbed on beside her. Outside, the first drone began its final descent. Its weapons were visible now. Jalen jumped into the hovercraft and slammed the engine switch. The machine roared. He sped forward, the dust flying behind him as the bunker collapsed in flames. The drone followed. It fired. Rocks exploded near them and Jalen swerved hard. Kaylee screamed but held on to her mother. Jalen looked back once and saw the second drone joining the chase. His teeth clenched. "Hold on!" They raced through the ruined city, past fallen towers and burned tanks. Drones fired again and again, missing by inches. Jalen turned sharply, taking them through a broken tunnel. The lights flickered above. The hovercraft slammed against the wall but kept going. The tunnel opened onto a wide bridge, half destroyed. The hovercraft flew over broken gaps, dodging holes and fire. Kaylee looked back. "They're catching up." Jalen turned toward a dark canyon ahead. "I know. That's the point." He flew toward it. At the last second, he pushed a button on the control panel. The back of the craft opened and dropped a scrap mine, a leftover from the war. The drones didn't notice. They flew closer. Then, boom. The blast shook the canyon. One drone exploded in fire. The other swerved, damaged, and hit a wall. Smoke filled the air. Jalen didn't stop. He pushed the craft forward until they reached a hidden path deep in the forest, far from the scanners. Finally, he stopped. His hands were shaking. He looked at the child. Kaylee was crying silently, but her mother was still alive. "You okay?" he asked. Kaylee nodded. "That was loud." Jalen managed a weak smile. "Yeah, it usually is." She looked at him for a long time. Why are you helping us? He looked at the sky, then at her. Because no one else did. She placed the doll in his hand and said softly, "Now she's yours too." And for the first time in years, Jalen felt like he wasn't just running anymore. He was protecting something that mattered, and it wasn't over yet. The escape that almost failed. They had survived the drones, for now. The forest was quiet, but the silence didn't feel safe. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Jalen kept the hovercraft hidden beneath thick branches, checking every sound, every shadow. The little alien girl, Kaylee, held her injured mother's hand as they lay beneath the open sky for the first time in days. The stars above were distant, cold, and far too quiet. But they were alive. Jalen knew that wouldn't last. He stood on a hilltop holding a weak signal scanner, searching for any nearby ship, town, or friendly signal. Nothing. The war had erased nearly everything. But Jalen remembered something. An old rebel outpost just beyond the mountain cliffs. It was far and dangerous, but it might be their only chance. He returned to the camp and looked at the girl. "We can't stay here," he said. "We move." At sunrise, Kaylee only nodded, her small fingers gripping the doll tighter. By morning, Jalen had fixed the craft as much as possible. It was still slow and the shields were weak, but it could fly. He gently lifted Kaylee's mother into the back seat, securing her with blankets and straps. Kaylee sat beside her, silent and watchful. The hovercraft rose above the trees, shaking, slightly but steady. Jalen pushed the controls forward. The sky ahead looked clear, but he didn't trust it. He had learned that the most dangerous moments often came in silence. They moved fast, crossing long stretches of burned ground and dead rivers. Every mile brought them closer to hope, but Kaylee's mother grew weaker with each passing hour. Her breath was short, her skin pale. Kaylee whispered songs in her ear, trying to keep her awake. Suddenly, the warning light flashed. Jalen frowned. "What now?" A second later, a high-pitched sound pierced the sky. He looked up, and his heart stopped. 2 fighter drones, larger than before, had locked onto them. "Hold tight," he shouted. The hovercraft dove low, skimming across the cracked earth. The drones followed with deadly speed, firing bursts of plasma that exploded behind them. The hovercraft rocked violently. Kaylee screamed, covering her mother's body. Jalen pushed the engine harder. The old machine groaned under pressure. He turned sharply, entering a deep canyon filled with fog. The drones hesitated for a second, but followed. One blast struck the back engine. Flames shot out, and the vehicle tilted. Jalen fought the controls. "No, not now!" Kaylee cried. "Don't let us fall!" Jalen gritted his teeth and forced the craft forward, but it was too late. The hovercraft dropped from the sky like a stone, smashing into the canyon floor. Everything went black. For a long time, there was only silence. Then came the sound of fire, cracking metal, a weak cough. Jalen opened his eyes. Pain shot through his side. The front of the hovercraft was crushed, smoke rising into the air. He turned his head. Kaylee and her mother were trapped in the back. He pulled himself out and crawled to them. "Kaylee!" he shouted. The girl opened her eyes slowly. She was bruised but alive. Her mother, however, wasn't moving. Jalen broke. The back door opened with all his strength. He pulled them both out, coughing from the smoke. He dragged them away from the wreck just before it exploded in a blast of fire. The force threw him back. He landed hard on the ground, barely conscious. But Kaylee was there. She crawled to him, her tiny hands pressing against his face. "Please, get up. Please." He opened his eyes. They had survived. Again. But just barely. As the fire behind them burned, Jalen looked at the broken sky and whispered, "We need a miracle." And deep in her arms, Kaylee held something glowing. A crystal that had fallen from her mother's necklace, now shining bright blue. Jalen stared at it. "What is that?" he asked. Kaylee blinked. She said, "It would guide us." The light grew stronger, pointing toward the northern mountains. Jalen didn't know what waited there, but it was better than waiting for death here. He stood slowly, pain screaming in his bones. "Then we follow it," he said, and they walked into the shadows once more, together. She called him Father. The mountains rose like broken teeth against the cloudy sky. Cold wind cut through the trees, and each step felt heavier than the last. Jalen moved slowly, carrying Kaylee's weak mother on his back. His ribs hurt from the crash, his legs burned from walking, but he didn't stop. The glowing crystal around Kaylee's neck pulsed softly, always pointing in the same direction, toward something they hadn't yet seen, something unknown. Kaylee walked beside him, holding the doll in one hand and gripping his coat with the other. She hadn't spoken much since the crash. Her eyes were red from crying, and her face looked older now, as if the weight of survival had stolen her childhood. As they reached a clearing, Jalen finally saw what the crystal had been guiding them toward. A narrow path hidden behind thick vines, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. The stone above the entrance had strange symbols. Some of them matched the ones Kaylee had drawn back in the bunker. She touched the wall gently, and the crystal glowed brighter. A soft humming sound came from inside. Jalen pushed forward, following the noise. The path led into a cave. Inside it was warmer, dry, safe. Torches lit up on their own as they walked deeper. Whoever had built this place had planned for someone to return. Jalen laid Kaylee's mother on a stone bed, covering her with his jacket. She was still breathing, but barely. Her skin was cold and her hands had stopped moving. "I don't think she has much time," he whispered. Kaylee didn't answer. She just sat near her mother, holding her hand tightly. Hours passed. Night came. Jalen sat against the wall, exhausted. Kaylee leaned her head on his side and fell asleep, her small fingers still wrapped around his coat. In her sleep, she whispered a word that made Jalen freeze. "Papa." He looked down at her, unsure of what to say or feel. He wasn't her father. He had met her only days ago. But in her eyes, he had become something more. Someone who stayed. Someone who protected. Someone who didn't walk away. For the first time in years, he felt something soft rise in his chest. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder and whispered back, "I'm here." In the morning, voices came. Not enemy drones or machines, but footsteps. Quiet, careful. Jalen stood up fast and pulled out his weapon. Kaylee stirred, waking up just as a group of people entered the cave. Humans, rebels, old fighters who had once fought beside Jalen during the war. They wore mixed armor and carried heavy rifles, but their faces showed surprise when they saw him. "Jalen?" one of them asked. "We thought you were dead." He didn't lower his weapon. "I might be. Who are you with now?" "Still with the cause," the man replied, "but there's no war left to fight." Jalen stepped aside to reveal Kaylee and her mother. The rebels stared. "That's not just any alien," one whispered. "She's one of them, the royal ones. The ones who tried to make peace before everything burned." Jalen nodded slowly. "They're still being hunted." The rebel leader frowned. "If others find her, they'll kill her. Some people still want this war to go on forever." Jalen's voice turned hard. "I won't let that happen." The rebel looked at him closely. "You've changed." Jalen looked down at Kaylee. "She changed me." The rebels agreed to help. They brought supplies, food, and medicine. Kaylee's mother was still alive, but slipping fast. One rebel brought a healing kit and tried to stabilize her, but it was clear she would not last long. Later that night, Kaylee sat beside Jalen and asked in a soft voice, "Will she die?" He didn't lie. "Yes." Kaylee wiped her tears with her sleeve. "Then I'll stay with you." Jalen blinked. "You don't have to say that." "But I want to," she said. "You're my papa now." The word didn't scare him this time, it gave him strength. He pulled her close and said, "Then I'll protect you. Always." Outside, the wind howled. But inside that cave, Something stronger than fear had been born. A bond. One that would not break. The last shelter, Burnsfire, wasn't supposed to return to this place. The hidden cave had felt like a miracle, a forgotten corner of peace in a world that had burned for too long. Jalen had hoped it would last. Just long enough for Kaylee's mother to recover. Just long enough to find answers. But peace, it seemed, had a short life in the ashes of war. It began with a whisper. A rebel scout returned from the ridge, his face pale. They found us. Jalen's heart dropped. How many? Too many, the scout said. Old mercenaries, bounty hunters. Someone must have tracked the girl's bloodline. Jalen didn't wait. He rushed back to the cave. Kaylee was singing softly to her mother, who barely breathed now. Her song was sad and slow, like a lullaby meant for goodbye. The moment Jalen entered, Kaylee looked up and saw everything in his eyes before he spoke. They're coming, aren't they? She asked. He nodded. She didn't cry this time. She only held her mother's hand tighter. The rebels worked fast, preparing the exit path through the mountain tunnels. Jalen wanted to run. He wanted to take Kaylee and disappear, but her mother, she couldn't move. Not anymore. Kaylee didn't want to leave her. I'll carry her, Jalen said, voice rough. But Kaylee's mother opened her eyes one last time. Her voice was almost gone. No. Protect Kaylee, not me. Jalen shook his head. You'll make it? No, she whispered. Promise me. Keep her safe. Then she looked at Kaylee. Shine bright, little star. Kaylee sobbed, her small hand covering her mother's chest. Please don't go. Please. The sound of gunfire broke the moment. They were here. Explosions rocked the entrance of the cave. Flames rushed down the stone halls. The rebels fired back, buying time. Jalen grabbed Kaylee, holding her close. We have to go now. Kaylee looked at her mother one last time, her body still and peaceful. She nodded, tears running down her cheeks, and whispered, Goodbye, Mama. Jalen picked her up and ran. The tunnels were filled with smoke and screams. Rebels fell behind them, covering their escape. Fire climbed the walls. The heat was unbearable. Kaylee buried her face in Jalen's chest and whispered, It's all burning. Yes, he said, but we're still alive. They broke into the open air, the mountain wind cold and sharp against their faces. The cave collapsed behind them, the fire swallowing everything. Jalen didn't stop running. He didn't stop until they reached the backup hoverbike the rebels had left in the forest. He strapped Kaylee in front of him, her arms shaking as she clung to his coat. Where will we go? She asked softly. Somewhere they can't find you, he said. Somewhere new. She looked up at him through wet eyes. Will Mama still see us? Jalen didn't know how to answer. He just placed her, doll back in her hands, and whispered, She'll always be with you. The hoverbike roared to life, and they flew into the dark sky, leaving behind the last place Kaylee would ever call home. But she wasn't alone anymore, and neither was Jalen. He held her tightly, flying into the unknown. He had lost many things in the war, but this child, this bond, they were not something he would lose again. Not now, not ever. The child of hope. The stars above were quiet, but something had changed. For days, Jalen and Kaylee traveled across broken lands and frozen valleys, flying through hidden paths and silent skies. The war was long over, but the shadows it left behind still hunted the girl. Jalen could feel the danger following them like a cold breath on the back of his neck. Yet, despite the fear, he didn't run. He had made a promise to a dying mother, to a frightened child, and to himself. They reached an old human base hidden deep within a canyon. It had once been Jalen's command post, back when he wore armor and obeyed orders without question. Now it stood half dead, its walls cracked, its lights dim. But people still lived inside. Soldiers, refugees, old friends who remembered his name. When they saw Kaylee, their faces filled with confusion, then fear. You brought one of them here? The commander asked. Jalen stepped forward. She's not the enemy. She's not human. No, Jalen said firmly. But she's the reason I still am. The base argued. Some wanted to turn her away. Others whispered that she was dangerous, that she would bring trouble. Jalen said nothing until Kaylee stepped forward on her own. She walked into the middle of the room, holding the glowing crystal in her small hand. The same crystal that had guided them through fire and death. It pulsed softly, and then the room shifted. Light filled the walls. Old machines powered up. A message played. A hologram of her mother, recorded long ago. It showed the truth. Kaylee was the last of a peaceful alien royal line, one that had once offered unity to humanity before the war began. She carried not just blood, but memory, history, and the lost hope of two worlds. The room fell silent. Jalen looked around. You were ready to kill her because you were afraid. But I saw her cry in the ruins, I saw her beg for help, and I saw that no one listened. She's just a child, someone whispered. No, Jalen said, she's a second chance. Kaylee stood beside him, her hand in his. She wasn't shaking anymore. The commander sighed. If she stays here, others will come. Then let them come, Jalen replied, but we protect her. And for the first time, the base agreed. They built a room for her, gave her food, books, peace. Days passed. Kaylee smiled again, laughed again. She even gave her doll a new name, Hope. And one evening, as Jalen sat by the window watching stars return to the sky, Kaylee curled up beside him and asked, "Do you think Mama sees us now?" He nodded slowly. "I think she never stopped." Kaylee rested her head on his shoulder. "Then I'm safe." Yes, Jalen thought. You are. And maybe, just maybe, the world would be better now, because someone had listened to a tiny voice in the ruins that once whispered, "Please don't leave us, human." He didn't, and he never would.